Welcome, traveler. Are you looking for male characters in gacha games? That's an arduous and pointless task. For you see, they are very hard to come by. You'll be out there waiting for years for a perfect cool male character, and all you get is the booba. So much booba. It's everywhere, bouncing around like there is no physics in this world. Just accept it. You can't escape. You will pull for the waifus. You will embrace the booba. Forget about these dudes. Who needs them anyway? Ladies are objectively better. On a serious note, there aren't many male characters in most popular gacha games, and Wuthering Waves is not an exception. In some games, there are no men at all, and even if they ever appear, they get deleted, even if they are just self-insert MCs. Rest in peace, male dream seeker. You will be remembered, probably. And it is to be expected because the gooning aspect has traditionally been more important than the gameplay aspect in these games. And most gacha players have traditionally been like 90% dudes. I totally haven't pulled the statistics numbers out of my ass, trust me. I pulled them out of my ass actually. However, there are some older gacha games that treat men well, at least give them a good story and make them strong meta-wise. For example, Fate Grand Order has some cool male characters, although they also lean into the waifu stuff. But with Genshin Impact going massively mainstream and attracting people who had never played gacha games before, and even people that had never played games at all, the gacha gaming audience changed a bit. We will never know the exact gender ratio of gacha gamers, because they don't publish the statistics from their surveys, but it is definitely not as one-sided as it used to be. But there is some data suggesting that in big gacha games like Genshin, it's close to the general gender ratio for gamers, which is 55 to 45, roughly, not as skewed to one side as you might expect. Therefore, the demand for male characters is higher now, and we can actually see more people waiting patiently for male characters that were teased and posting about their wish to have more cool male characters in their favorite gacha. And being told to play freaking Love and Deep Space over it. The cycle that never ends. Do I even need to explain that otama games are different from action RPGs? That people might want to kill mobs with characters they find aesthetically pleasing, and they might not want to watch romantic scenes with dudes who look like members of a K-pop group. So do we need more male characters in gacha games these days? Or do we need to delete all the male characters, so they don't get on the way of releasing more waifus? Will male character ever be as marketable as female ones? Let's speculate a bit on this topic. I'm gonna be 100% objective, as I always am, of course. To preface this, I'm not even an avid husband collector. I skipped a whole bunch of dudes in different games, but I also pulled for quite a few that I found interesting. So I want to believe that I'm not very biased, just a little biased, you know. In my opinion, it wouldn't hurt if some popular gacha games sustain a better gender ratio. I don't think it should be skewed towards male characters, but 1-to-1 would be extremely fair, but impossible. 1-to-2 is a relatively balanced spot where we get a lot of waifus and waifu enjoyers have high incentive to spend, but husband enjoyers get something nice regularly, not once a year. With 1-to-3 ratio, husband enjoyers are already going to suffer waiting for some new male characters. Anything beyond that is basically a waifu collecting game that pretends to be something else. But you might ask, wouldn't gacha companies go bankrupt if they released more males? If there's demand, why don't dudes sell? They do sell, actually, just not always. And while on average popular male characters sell worse than popular female characters, they can still bypass many female characters in sales numbers. Jinyuan and Imbibitor Lune did very well in HSR. So well, in fact, that Jinyuan still receives buffs in attempts to make him playable. However, female characters are undoubtedly easier to market, because they're just better. They're just fundamentally more universally attractive than guys. Many women will gladly pull for cool female characters, not that many men are ready to pull for males. Especially if these characters don't look super manly. It's much harder to sell male characters just for the hotness factor. So it's more about the sum of different components like story, personality, maybe voice actors, design, and gameplay, not just visual appeal. Even when it comes to female characters though, the ones that have a lot of story significance and have an interesting backstory tend to sell better than the ones that are just hot and dropped out of nowhere, unless those characters are absolutely broken. Despite being harder to market, male characters can still sell relatively well, if the companies put some effort into advertising them and making appealing designs. Male characters sell badly because they are almost always an afterthought. I can't say that even huge gacha companies do a good job introducing them. Let's have a look at HSR, the horror's game that still releases male characters semi-regularly. Zhao Chu has the most NPC design of all playable characters. He looks like a 3-star. He's only good with a couple of characters, unlike other supports, and his light cone is better long-term investment than the guy himself. Argency is very fun. I love his personality, and he has a great design that stands out. But he was introduced out of nowhere, with no setup, in the same version with a pretty good support, and a rerun of another good support, and right before yet another pretty good support. He is also tailor-made for one endgame mode, and the addition as a path wasn't that good at the time, but he was introduced right after Acheron, in the same version with Robin, and right before Firefly. All super broken meta characters, with a lot of story significance. So people, including me, had no currency to pull for him, and he was completely overshadowed. Although I like him a lot, and his teaser was fire, and he has a backstory almost as tragic as Acheron's. But he didn't receive a Myriad Celestia teaser for this backstory. Dr. Ratio just dropped out of nowhere and was given completely for free. Aventurine and Sunday had a proper setup. They were shown in a good part of the story, and therefore they are more popular with the community. Who could have expected that, right? Very often, male characters receive less marketing, less screen time in the story, and less attention. And their banners are used as fillers between popular anticipated characters. The male designs also tend to be less imaginative than female character designs. Very often they have a very limited range of hairstyles. Male characters' attire is also not very imaginative. For the most part, they just wear different variations of suits. This causes design fatigue a few characters down the line. They are limited gacha characters. They are supposed to look interesting, to stand out in some way. Sometimes this applies to female characters too. For example, all the Xianzhou women look like they shop at the same clothes store. And of course, another factor contributing to lower sales for male characters is that they release like twice a year, sometimes even once a year. There is always plenty of time to save for them, their weapons and their dupes, while getting a few waifus on the way too. I got every single limited tall male character in Genshin Impact as a free-to-play, and also got a bunch of women. If let's say at least every third character was male, saving for them would be a little harder. There would be more incentive to spend. And finally, male characters will face some backlash from the more waifu-oriented parasocial part of the community on their release, on their drip marketing, and so on, because, well, they're not waifus, they are disgusting men who can steal my waifus. How my waifu dares talk to this dude? Is she cheating on me? It's not as big of a deal in the West, although you get some nasty comments here and there, but in the East, it is more prevalent. These people are not the absolute majority, of course. The most unhinged ones are a vocal minority of people who took escapism and parasocial attraction to a very unhealthy and delusional level. But this audience is ready to pay, and pay a lot, even for some optional stuff like overpriced skins. And they are ready to harass, threaten, and dox the devs if they don't get what they want, unfortunately. I'm all for people indulging in escapism and degeneracy, because life can suck, you know? But if you're ready to hurt real people over this crap, it's a sign that you've gone too far. I'd say there are plenty of waifu collecting games already, and more keep releasing every year. And if every single gacha game was like that, they would have never broken through the normie barrier. And the devs should decide in the very beginning whether they want to farm parasocial audience and make a waifu collector with no males, or they want to attract a more general audience and make a game with both genders, and release characters of both genders regularly. In short, the devs should commit to one approach and follow through with it. Baiting and switching in the middle is not fun or honest towards the audience. But gacha companies want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to attract husband viewers, they want their audience to be bigger and more generalized for free advertisement and bigger community, but they don't want to commit to actually serving this part of the audience with regular good-looking male characters. Although male characters are beneficial for everybody in a way, as spacing out the waifu banners a bit gives a little more time to save currency and spend less, promoting better financial decisions, you know. Quite often I see people unhappy with the fact that their desired characters are too close together, so they need to rely on luck, or spend more than they wanted to, or skip some characters and wait for their rerun in order to get them all. After all, not everyone can afford to spend copious amounts of money to get every single waifu they like on release. Besides, sales are not the only way the character can add value to the game. If a character doesn't sell super well but becomes a meme, gains a dedicated fanbase and generates a lot of fan-made content, that in turn acts as free advertising for the game, this character still profits the company, just not in a direct way. So now let's return to Wuthering Waves in particular. There is a reason why there are some expectations for getting more male characters, and people who are displeased with the current character roster and the reliance on dating sim experience. Wuthering Waves at launch was known for super chiseled, cool, manly male characters that were widely regarded as the best male character models in gacha gaming. It was one of the game's selling points. One of the points brought up in those endless Genshin comparisons. Look, Genshin men look so inferior compared to Wuwa men. Wuwa men are true chads. There were plenty of arguments like this, and I agree with them. At the start, the game was presented as one that has both genders. They did not present it as waifu collector on release. It looked like a sci-fi action RPG about post-apocalyptic world and people trying to survive in it, with some epic overarching narrative full of action and adventure. It did not look like a dating sim. They succeeded in attracting the general audience, not only hardcore gooners. For example, the character that piqued my interest and motivated me to look more into Wuwa was Kalkaro, because he's like playable Sephiroth for free, very cool and edgy, just the character type I like. We all know where it went. But now male characters are almost non-existent. To be fair, they released 2 limited male characters in version 1. However, male characters tend to be really underutilized in the story. They also teased a couple of interesting male characters in the story, but nobody knows when they will come. And in the meantime, there hasn't been a single new male 4-star. Brand looks interesting, but he's the only male character teased for the new region. Doesn't mean that he'll be the only male character in that region, but with current tendencies, he might be the only one. If the game was presented as a waifu collector since the very beginning, nobody would ask for males, like nobody asks for males in Honkai Impact 3rd, Girls Frontline 2, Snowbreak, Azur Lane, and so on. So I hope I managed to explain why there is a demand for male characters in Wuwa, and why there are so many people asking for playable Gasoline and Scar all the time, and why some people are displeased with the harem plot. The reality is that the landscape of gacha gaming has changed quite a bit in the recent years, and there are more women playing these games than you might think. So if Kura were to add more male characters to Wuthering Waves, this would be greatly appreciated by a sizable chunk of their fanbase. All in all, I'm still positive about the future of Wuwa, and willing to see what they have in store for the fallen regions. But unfortunately, I have some reservations about the story content and the gender ratio of playable characters. That's all I wanted to say. I hope I managed to explain my opinions clearly, and I'll be happy to see yours in the comments. Goodbye!